Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we have the final installment of 1984, Chapter 3, Part 6, the last chapter and part of 1984. Wow, what a journey it has been to get to this point, and what a complete reversal in Winston that we have seen from the beginning to the major turning point just before chapter 3 at the end of chapter 2, and now to see him revert back to a good party member. And in the grand scheme of things, nothing Winston did went unnoticed by the party. They had control of him. Maybe not control of him, but they definitely had him in their sights. Nothing was a secret. All the stuff he did with Julia, the writing in his diary, renting out the room, probably even talking to the proles, all that stuff. In the end, it didn't matter. They knew everything. It's a shocking turn that happened after chapter 2 and everything we've learned so far in chapter 3. It's like things are just coming full circle. You know, all the dialogue between him and O'Brien is just opening my eyes to, I mean, like, it was all futile from the beginning for Winston. Gosh, crazy. Let's hop right into it. I'll go to the first slide. And we see Winston at the Chestnut Tree Cafe. Interestingly enough, do you guys remember the Chestnut Tree Cafe was mentioned prior with Winston? I believe it was mentioned with Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, saying that they used to frequent the Chestnut Tree Cafe. He described Syme as a person who likes to hang out there as well. And he said that a lot of revolutionaries or like rebellious people kind of liked to hang out here. But now Winston is here. And it seems like Winston has been out of the Ministry of Love, maybe discharged as a patient from the Ministry of Love for a while, because it says here that he's sitting in his usual corner. So he's had to have been here multiple times. And he's just kind of hanging out here. He's got the telescreens are up. He's listening to the telescreens. Right now, the telescreen is playing some music, but he's waiting for a bulletin from the African front of the war that Oceania is in. And it says that he's getting worried. He's getting worried because Oceania may lose Central Africa to their enemies, Eurasia, East Asia, what have you. So we already see a difference in Winston here. He's actually paying attention to the telescreen. And he's actually invested in this war. That's one thing. And keep count of all the things that we see Winston completely do the opposite of compared to what he was doing earlier in the book. It says that he's grown fatter since release. The skin on his nose and cheekbones was coarsely red. He's got back his weight from the Ministry of Truth, where he was completely emaciated and he was like a skeleton-like figure. It's also stated that he's got a new job and he's got plenty of money. He has a higher paying job. It's almost like he got a promotion. And it says more highly paid than his old job had been. So, interesting that they give him this new better job since being out of the Ministry of Truth. You would think that they would maybe give him like a lesser job just for all the transgressions that he did, or be more stingy with it. But no, they've actively rehabbed him to be back to normal in Oceania, which is very interesting. But it's all going to lead into the very end here. So Winston can't stop thinking about the war. Let me go to page 300 here. He can't stop thinking about the war. He's getting excited and he's getting emotional, thinking that, oh my gosh, we could be defeated in Africa and we could have this huge Eurasian army flooding into Africa, which could potentially lead to the destruction of the party, because if they take over Africa, then they're slowly encroaching on Oceania. So you see the things in the war section, the War's Peace section from Goldstein's book. And remember, O'Brien wrote Goldstein's book, but all that stuff in there was kind of true. He's telling Winston the truth. Winston's buying into that. It's almost like he forgot that he read that. I mean, and probably in some ways he has, just from his sessions with O'Brien at the Ministry of Love. I think I was saying Ministry of Truth, Ministry of Love. So he doesn't realize that all this like war stuff is kind of a sham. Nobody ever really wins. Nobody ever really attacks anybody else, except for in those designated territories. You guys remember there was like 4 designated territories where that's like where the only battles happen. That's where the only transfer of land happens. But Winston actually now believes, and he's starting to have these extraordinary medley of feelings at the potential for a loss. But they're not going to lose. This is the whole point, to get you to buy in and perpetuate this war. To think that, hey, this war, we need this war, or else we're going to get taken over. Next thing you know, Winston starts to think 2 + 2 = 5. I didn't put this in the slide, but his thoughts wandered again. Almost unconsciously, he traced with his finger in the dust on the table 2 + 2 = 5. Another little small point, Winston has completely changed. Remember before he was fighting with O'Brien to say, 2 + 2 = 5. Now he's willingly writing it out on the table. On page 301, he starts to think about Julia, and he remembers that she said that they can't get inside of you. And then he remembers O'Brien says, what happens to you here is forever. And I think O'Brien at the Ministry of Love has gotten inside of him and has gotten him to finally betray Julia, which is kind of what he does with telling O'Brien to replace him with Julia with the rats. He says the only way he's talking to himself, Winston is talking to himself and saying the only way to survive this is to interpose somebody else between him and the rats. And he's screaming out Julia's name. No, do it to Julia. I don't care. Not me. And the rats never get let out of the cage because he's finally betrayed Julia. It's not just in his mind now. It's in his heart. He did anything he could to survive. So ever since he was released, it's stated that he has seen Julia. And there's actually no danger in it. It kind of happened by chance in some park. And it's stated that he could meet her again if they wanted to. But he's not really interested in it anymore. And he states how different she is now. Her face has become sallower. She's got a long scar on her forehead. Her body feels like a corpse because he actually reaches out, wraps his arms around her hips. Kind of like old times, like maybe they're about to get intimate. He doesn't really care that he didn't see a telescreen around. There's probably microphones, but I don't think he really cared. It said it did not matter, nothing mattered. They could have laid down on the ground and done that if they wanted to. She made no response whatever to the clasp of his arm. She did not even try to disengage herself. He knew now what had changed in her. And then this is where it states her face was sallower, long scar across her forehead. It was that her waist had grown thicker in a surprising way, had stiffened. So it's interesting. This kind of describes Winston's first wife. Back when Winston and his first wife were getting intimate, remember he kind of stated that her body stiffened up. Like she didn't want it. She wanted it to happen because she wanted a kid for the party, but she didn't want it to happen because that whole sexual instinct has been beaten out of the people. And just one final note on Julia, her feet have grown broader. Kind of interesting note there. It's almost like she's gotten bigger, kind of like the prole women were bigger. Remember, they were observing that one prole lady outside singing, hanging laundry, and Winston notes how much bigger she is compared to Julia. Very interesting. And then page 302 here, they talk to each other a little bit, and they mention how they betrayed each other. She betrayed Winston just as Winston betrayed Julia with the rats and his face in the rat cage. And I think that was the trick to get Winston to stop loving Julia. And now those feelings are going to be replaced for a love for something else. But he says he does not feel the same towards Julia. And they want to kind of meet up again. And they say, we must meet again. Yes, she said, we must meet again. And they walk with each other, but they end up getting separated a little bit, and Winston kind of lets her go off on her own. They don't try to stick together. And they don't really make any concrete plans. Winston actually starts to walk away from her. And it says here, he was overwhelmed by a desire not so much to get away from Julia as to get back to the Chestnut Tree Cafe, which had never seemed so attractive at this moment. So they're saying they want to get back together, but they don't really want to. Winston has a whole nother love now. He is entirely preoccupied with party politics, it seems like, because he's going to go back to the Chestnut Tree Cafe, where, again, he's a fixture there. This is his usual spot. And he's going to just start drinking. And that's actually all he really does there. He plays a little bit of chess, and he just drinks victory gin. All the time. Nobody in the Chestnut Tree Cafe questions it. He would now rather do that, listen to the bulletins from the telescreen, take part in the party over hanging out with Julia. So the program at the Ministry of Love has been successful, by my understanding here. It's stated that sometimes he does go back to the Ministry of, was it Truth? Yeah, the Truth. Ministry of Truth. I guess that's where he still currently works. But his new job is really crazy. His new job is like, I'm trying to compare it to something. Like one of the jobs from Office Space where the two Bobs are asking the people, what exactly do you do here? That's the kind of vibe that I get from Winston's new job, because it's stated that his new job involves working on the compilation for the 11th edition of the Newspeak Dictionary, which is, again, what Syme was working on. I believe it was the 11th edition. And he's working on these interim reports. But what it was they were reporting on, he had never definitely found out. It was something to do with the question of whether commas should be placed inside brackets or outside. There were 4 others on the committee. They would assemble. they would say there was not really anything to be done. They would enter minutes, draft long memoranda, which were never finished. And then suddenly life would go out of them. They would sit around the table looking at one another with extinct eyes. It really seems like this job doesn't really have a purpose. It's just there to be there, just to do like busy work and stuff. And I wrote here, it seems like the group does not add any value to that project at all. Next thing you know, Winston has a memory, but it's interesting, he calls it a false memory. Before, earlier in the book, when Winston has flashbacks to like his mom or his childhood, he never calls it a false memory, but now he's calling it a false memory. So the dream or the vision that he has is he sees himself as a boy. He thinks about a month before his mother disappeared, and Winston is throwing a fit so much to the point where his mom says, "Hey, if you be nice, I'll go out and buy you a toy." So she goes out and buys this toy or like a board game, Snakes and Ladders. My mind goes to Chutes and Ladders, so that's why I said this was a board game. But she goes out to buy him something, and his vision is of him and his whole family playing and being happy. But he immediately pushes this out of his mind. It was a false memory. He was troubled by false memories occasionally. They did not matter so long as one knew them for what they were. Some things had happened, others had not happened. So, again, to go along with this theme that Winston is like a completely rehabbed, brand new party member, whereas before, he would not think of this as a false memory. Now he does. It's almost like he's performing Crime Stop on himself to prevent himself from believing that this stuff ever happened. What's the one thing that has always happened? Well, remember, Big Brother, the party. That stuff has been persistent. Anything else you can't really believe unless the party says so. And finally, the last portion here, the last slide, Winston finally gets a victory. The bulletin comes up from the telescreen. A shrill trumpet call had pierced the air. It was the bulletin. And the bulletin states that control of Africa is brought back into Oceania's hands. And Winston becomes ecstatic in a way that we've never seen Winston ecstatic before at the announcement from the telescreen. Anytime previous to Chapter 3, the telescreens are buzzing off. He doesn't really care. Like, he kind of pays attention to it, but he's not ecstatic about it as he is in this moment. Again, fully invested in this war and that the war makes a difference. And it's actually stated that this is the final transformation that Winston had to take part in. As we can see, Winston has changed a lot. The Winston in Chapter 3, Part 6 is different than the Winston we see in all of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. And this was the final metamorphosis, the final stage of his transformation. The final healing change has now happened. Do I got one more slide? Okay, yeah, I do have one more slide. Sorry. And then we see Winston back at the Ministry of Love. So it's kind of confusing. I was almost kind of thinking everything up to this point was just a dream and Winston was always in the Ministry of Love. But no, I think he actually was out at the Chestnut Tree Cafe and had met Julia and stuff. Then he's forced to come back to the Ministry of Love. And it's stated here, this is on the last page, Winston is walking down one of the corridors and there's an armed guard at his back. And just like it's stated multiple times throughout Chapter 3, the ultimate ending here is they will shoot you. And I always kind of thought that maybe that was a metaphor for, or not a metaphor, but they would shoot you only if you weren't rehabbed. But no, sounds like they're going to shoot you either way, even if you do get rehabbed properly or not. Because now the bullet, as the bullet's entering his brain, the party has done their job. Winston's ultimate transformation here was the victory over himself. He's invested in a telescreen. He's not asking too many questions. He doesn't really care to run off with Julie anymore. He's ecstatic at the war effort. 2 + 2 does equal 5. He's got this new job, and he's won the ultimate victory over himself, which is that in the last sentence here, everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother. And that's where they shoot him. Because, to quote O'Brien, they're not interested in making martyrs in Oceania. That's where the previous societies have made mistakes. No, they shot him when he is fully bought in. And yeah, I mean, that's the best way to describe it. He's fully bought in. It's not just in his mind, it's in his heart. He can't love Julie anymore. He now loves Big Brother. And that's where we end, guys. That's where we end. 1984. Wow. Here's just a couple discussion questions. I'll have a blog post for this later. And you can find that at Chee-Tash.ghost.io. There'll be a link in the description. Take a look. Let me know what you think. How has Winston changed? What are some of the signs you've seen that Winston has changed? And what was that ultimate victory? I know we kind of just mentioned it, but let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments. Guys, I really appreciate you making it this far through 1984. We're gonna have to start a new book now. Wow, it's been a journey. Thank you guys so much for being on this journey through 1984. If you're just starting your journey, check out the playlist. You can watch it from start to finish, from Chapter 1 to Chapter 3, Part 6. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.